Reparations, the myths, the lies, and the receipts. This video is in response to a comment I received under one of my other videos. The comment stated, "Reparations. Blacks weren't the only slaves in history. Get your reparations from black slavers in Africa that sold your relatives in the first place. Reparations make no sense if you were never a slave in the first place. Just looking for a free handout as always. Boo-hoo, poor me. It's your choice to make something of yourself, no matter your skin color. You are just looking for more free money for something you were never a part of. That's not a race problem. That's a you problem. Get over yourself. You're not the only race to be made slaves to ever exist." You've heard it before. Blacks weren't the only slaves in history. Get your reparations from Africa. You were never a slave, so stop looking for a free handout. Today we're going to break this down point by point, from history, the receipts, and the facts that show exactly why this argument collapses the moment you look at the truth. Blacks weren't the only slaves in history. Yes, slavery has existed across cultures. The Romans had slaves, the Ottomans had slaves, even some African societies had systems of servitude. But here's the difference. The transatlantic slave trade was not just another case of slavery. It was the largest forced migration in human history, lasting over 400 years, involving more than 12 million Africans who were transported to the Americas. And it was racialized, meaning it created a global system that defined blackness as inherently inferior, justifying not just slavery, but centuries of economic exclusion. That's why it's not the same as everyone was a slave at some point. The scale, the ideology, and the economic impact were unprecedented. To the next point, get your reparations from the black slavers in Africa. Yes, some African rulers and elites sold captives to the Europeans, but let's be honest here. Africans did not build the slave ships. Africans did not create an intercontinental network financed by global banking systems. Africans did not invent the racial castes laws that made slavery hereditary for generations. European powers, Britain, Portugal, France, Spain, the Netherlands, and later the United States, industrialized slavery into a global profit machine. And here's the kicker. Those same European powers eventually turned around, colonized Africa, looted its resources, and destroyed those very African kingdoms. The generational wealth from slavery sits in Western nations, not in African states that were gutted by colonization. That's why reparations are aimed at the countries that directly profited, not the ones that were also victims. To the next point, you were never a slave, so reparations make no sense. If that logic applied, Germany wouldn't have paid reparations to the Holocaust survivors, to the Holocaust descendants. The US wouldn't have compensated Japanese Americans for World War II internment camps, and indigenous nations wouldn't receive land settlements for historic theft. Reparations aren't about paying people for a history lesson. They're about addressing the continuing harm. Black Americans didn't just lose out during slavery. After slavery came sharecropping, convict leasing, Jim Crow laws, redlining, mass incarceration, all designed to keep wealth out of Black American hands. Wealth doesn't magically appear. If your ancestors were blocked from owning land, from owning businesses, or getting fair wages, that missing wealth compounds across generations. And now, the black-white wealth gap in the United States is the same as it was in the 1960s. To the next point, you just want a free handout. Reparations are not charity. This is a debt. The United States economy was literally built on stolen black labor. Enslaved Africans generated billions for white landowners and for industries like cotton, banking, insurance, industries still thriving today. Economists estimate that if you account for the value of unpaid labor from 1619 to 1865 plus interest, the US owes the descendants of the enslaved over 20 trillion. That's not a handout. That's a bill. That's 400 years overdue. Also take into consideration that they were economically excluded since 1865. To the next point, there's not a race problem, there's a problem race. That isn't clever. It's just victim blaming. It shifts focus from systems to stereotypes. The reason we talk about race is because race was created as a social and legal tool to justify who gets resources, who gets rights, and who gets respect, and who doesn't. If there was no race problem, we wouldn't have racial disparities in wealth, in home ownership, education, incarceration, and even in healthcare outcomes. All measurable and all documented. Now comes the callousness. Get over it. Here's the thing. You can't just get over something that's still happening. The effects of slavery didn't end in 1865. The laws changed, but the systems evolved. If someone stole your family's house 150 years ago, passed it down to their children, and you were still homeless while their family lived in it, would you get over it? Or would you demand it back? So why do reparations matter now? Reparations aren't just about cash payouts. They include direct payments, land return, debt cancellation, education funding, business grants, policy changes that dismantle systemic racism. This is about closing the wealth gap that was engineered. It was not accidental. So the next time you hear, "You weren't a slave, get over it," remember, reparations are not about guilt. They're about justice. They're about correcting the theft, the exclusion, and the generational harm that they're still shaping in the present day. If we can pay reparations to other groups, if we can honor debts owed in every other context, then paying reparations to the descendants of the enslaved Africans isn't radical. It's simply keeping the same promise of justice we've made to everyone else. Slavery is not just history. It's a living legacy. And reparations are not about blame. They're about repair. We can't rewrite the past, but we can decide whether we want to keep living in its shadow. If you found this breakdown useful, hit like, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more deep dives into history they don't always teach you in school, because the truth deserves to be heard.